Alright, today we're back for another multi-tool video. This video is going to be a little bit different in the fact that it's more of a test than a review. So today, I will be testing 12 gauge wire cut test. So I went in my backyard, got a couple strands of 12 gauge wire, fairly not rusted, but it used to be galvanized. It's a little bit old. I took my best multi-tool out there, obviously, and cut it. So I know that this multi-tool can handle 12 gauge wire. I was going to do 9 gauge wire, but I don't really have any 9 gauge wire, and I think that'd be a little tough for me, to be entirely honest. So I got a couple strips of 12 gauge wire, and we're going to see, starting from, I don't know, what I think would be the best multi-tool cutting, or 12 gauge wire cutting tool. So first up, we have the Gerber Suspension MultiTool, the original one that I just so happened to get for $18 at Orson's Fram and Ham. So this one has my favorite type of pliers, which is a pressure cut instead of a cross cut. We're going to give this wire I'll tell you approximately about how much strength I use for each one of these wire cuts. Definitely going to need 2 hands for that. Alright, it cut. Didn't have to use 100% of my strength. Used more so about 60% of my strength. And there is minimal damage to the wire cutter. I've actually used these a lot to cut 12 gauge wire, so I know it works, and I know it works well. So overall, I'd give this a 9 out of 10 for 12 gauge wire cutting, just because these are a little bit uncomfortable to hold, so it kind of hurts my hands if I were to be doing that all day. Next up is the Gerber Suspension XT. Probably my favorite multi-tool of them all, just because they're a little bit lighter. They have a pocket clip, so I can actually not have to worry about them falling on my pants, and they have just about every single tool I would want in a multi-tool. Plus, they're pretty well made, so let's try this out. So these ones also have a pressure cut instead of a cross cut. Let's give this a try. I assume it's going to be relatively the same as the Gerber Suspension originals. Interesting. That one actually took less strength than the last one. That actually took only about 30% of my strength, is what I'd estimate it as. Not terrible. Not bad at all. That was actually fairly comfortable. I'd give that a 10 out of 10, to be entirely honest. Those weren't bad to cut at all. Next up, the Mossy Oak MultiTool. I have a story about this. When I was at work, I had to cut some 12 gauge wire, and these failed on me. The reason why they failed on me, I'll show you here. The only reason why they failed on me is because they're a cross cut and not a pressure cut. So we're going to test it out right here, right now. Alright, let's give these a try. 12 gauge wire, here we go. That wasn't that bad, actually. Maybe I was trying to cut 9 gauge wire or something, but last time when I was trying to cut wire, instead of cutting it in like normal, it just went like that and bent my multi-tool a little bit. But that one went pretty smoothly, actually, I'd say. Pretty well. I'd give that a 10 out of 10. Had the same comfort as the NXT. A little bit harder. You guys use a little more strength than this one. But due to the large size on this multi-tool, it's fairly comfortable to grab. So that passed the test, definitely. Next up is my Orson's Laser Blue multi-tool. fairly easy to open, nice and big. Has a cross cut instead of a pressure cut, same as the Mossy Oak. Let's give this a try. 12 gauge wire cut, here we go. That was a little bit uncomfortable. Took a lot of strength. Took about as much strength as these ones did. About 70% of my strength. It wasn't the most comfortable as well, but a little bit more comfortable than the Gerber suspension, just because of how big and how big these handles are. But it passed the test. Yeah, I did notice that halfway in the video, or halfway in cutting it, it started bending like that and not just going straight up. So that worried me a little bit, but it did pass the test. Next, but not least, is the Pohaku Multi-Tool 13-in-1. A little bit worried about these ones, just because of the overall quality of this and how kind of uncomfortable it feels and how small that wire cutter is. It's also a crossover, but we'll see. Hopefully these don't get absolutely destroyed in this test, so I can use them in a later video. Alright, 12 gauge, here we go. That took a lot of strength, and there is damage to it, but it is not much. It's more so just the paint getting scratched off. Like, it was actually fairly comfortable to hold, but it did take a lot of strength to use due to how much leverage I didn't have. Yeah, not terrible. Would get the job. I don't think that these would be able to do a 9 gauge wire, in my opinion. The Mossy Oak, the Suspension NXT, and the Suspension Gerber could probably all handle 9 gauge, but I don't think these could handle a 9 gauge wire, personally. It did, just like the Orion multi-tool, this one's also started to bend over like that instead of keeping straight, which did worry me a bit, but it passed the test. Next up is my least favorite multi-tool, but coolest looking multi-tool, the Charade Tough multi-tool. Ooh, this thing's hard to open. Alright, I do have a lot of leverage with this tool, but this tool does also have a lot of give into it. About a centimeter or two of give. This is a crossover plier wire cutter instead of a pressure wire cutter. But we'll see how it performs. Alright. Let's give this a go. That was really easy. It was really easy because I had so much leverage and how big these handles are out there. I would give that a 10 out of 10, to be entirely honest. Not terrible. Didn't have to put very much strength into it. It was fairly comfortable, and the wire came out fine. Well, as fine as cut can be. But that's a 10 out of 10 for me. That's surprising. I guess it's Charade Tough for a reason. Alright, next up is this multi-tool, which obviously cannot cut a 12 gauge wire just because it wasn't made to. So this does not get a pass for me, but oh well. Next up is the Grip 12-in-1 multi-tool. As I've said in the past, very uncomfortable to hold. It's just some sheet metal held together by some rivets. This one has a cross wire cutter rather than a pressure wire cutter. So let's just see how this goes. Oh, sheesh. It's hard to get a grip on this thing. Alright, I cut the wire. Was not comfortable. Left lines in my hand. Would not use these all day. but it could get the job done if you're desperate. 5 out of 10. Not comfortable, kind of hard. Also, just terrible design. Next up, but not least, the Flashlight Pro 4 Tactical Multi-Tool, which actually cannot cut wire, so I'm going to give this a 0. But those are all my multi-tools. If I was to rank them in wire cutting ability, to be entirely honest, the Charade Tough would be number 1 for wire cutting ability. It's very comfortable, has a lot of leverage, so you don't have to use that much strength. It's a good multi-tool. Next up would be the Gerber Suspension XT. Definitely comfortable, more comfortable than not bad. Has my favorite method of wire cutting, which is the pressure method instead of the cross method. So I do favor that one a lot. Next up would be the Gerber Suspension. This isn't as easy to cut wire as it is with these two, but it would get the job done, and it is fairly comfortable to hold. I did have to put a lot of strength into it, but it didn't really matter because it didn't hurt my hand at all. Next up would be the Orson's Farm & Home Multi-Tool. It has a lot of handle to it, so it's very comfortable to hold. Although, due to the cross method of wire cutting, it wasn't very effective at cutting the wire. Not very effective at all. But other than that, it got the job done. It got it done all right. Next up would be the Mossy Oak MultiTool. I was a little bit worried about this one. It didn't quite perform as I expected it to, and when it was cutting the wire, it kind of bent over, kind of crossed over a little bit. So this is more so in the middle tier. Next up would be the Pohaku Multi-Tool. Has an interesting design, but not very practical in use. The wire cutting area is very small, so I don't think it could handle any more than the 12 gauge wire. Next up, I think I'll do a 9 gauge wire for the next test. A little bit more towards the end. Then next up is the Grip Multi-Tool. Very uncomfortable. As I said, left lines in my hand that are still there actually. Very uncomfortable, very difficult to work with, but it got the job done, so that's the reason why it's on the list. Next up would be the Menards Multi-Tool, mainly because I personally believe this thing has the potential to cut wire. I think if I really tried hard, I think I could cut some wire with this thing if I really wanted to, but I'm not going to be trying that. The next up is the Flashlight Pro 4 Tactical Multi-Tool, which I don't think in any respect has any ability to cut 12 gauge wire. So in pure wire cutting ability, best, worst, or maybe not even capable of. Not too bad. Anyways, that's it for this video. Have a good day.